have to start out by saying that I have no formal training in project management, no training in infrastructure, no training in national security, and so we just kind of wing this stuff and make it up as we go, but that's part of what the fun is. So I just want to have that disclaimer up front so that before you take notes too seriously, you just recognize who you're taking your notes from. The other thing is that I'm not wearing a watch and I don't see a clock around here, so you're going to have to pull me off this stage because I will talk fast, I will talk loud, and I will keep on talking. So I have a number of slides that I want to get through. Hopefully I can make this somewhat entertaining and informative at the same time, but I definitely would like to leave time for questions or interactions or other activities like that. I was telling some of my staff on the way over here that I was jotting down some notes, not because I didn't know what to say when the slides came up, but I was more concerned that, just as I'm doing now, I was going to ramble on because I can speak to about 2 hours on each one of these slides individually. So with that warning up front, I just want to say a little bit, and John covered on this. I don't know how many folks are really familiar with the Department of Energy, or specifically the National Nuclear Security Administration. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to end up saying DOE for the Department of Energy and NNSA for the National Nuclear Security Administration. But just as a brief background, what is the NNSA? Its origins go back to the Manhattan Projects in the 1940s. Post-World War II, it evolved into the Atomic Energy Agency, as John mentioned, and supported President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace initiative. It became a cabinet level as the Department of Energy in the 70s due to the energy crisis. And in the 2000 timeframe, that's when the National Nuclear Security Administration was formed as a semi-autonomous organization within the Department of Energy. And if you don't know what a semi-autonomous organization is, that's okay, because after 16 years, we don't either. Again, just a few pictures. I mean, we are very proud of our Manhattan Project history. And, you know, a lot of things date back to that. In the upper left there, you can see some of the calutrons down at Oak Ridge where uranium was enriched for the first nuclear weapons. The front gate or the front door at Los Alamos National Laboratory, I think there's even an A&E or something series now called Manhattan that they relive some of the drama of the early days at the Manhattan Project, and the graphite pile on the upper right there in Chicago, and you can see Einstein and other folks that you recognize there. But we're very proud of the history and the origins in the Manhattan Project and the incredible things both in construction and science and you know, engineering that were done in a very, very short amount of time. NNSA now and what we are and who we are and what we do, certainly because of our Manhattan Project origins, we have the responsibility, the Department of Energy and NNSA, for maintaining the safety, security, and effectiveness of the nuclear deterrent. We loan them out to the Department of Defense, but we have responsibility, cradle to grave, to develop, design, maintain, disassemble, and retire the entire nuclear deterrent. We also, because of that expertise, as was mentioned, we also are at the forefronts of preventing and countering and responding to proliferation and terrorism threats from nuclear activities. You heard I spent some time in Russia and other places trying to chase down loose materials. And then finally, and a place that has an outstanding reputation in management and oversight is the Naval Reactors Program and Admiral Rickoff's program, and providing the operational support for naval propulsion and the nuclear naval propulsion activity. So that gives you a little bit of background on where we've been, why we exist, and where we're coming from. So where are we now? Well, clearly, as John was pointing out, we have a vast and complex enterprise. This we like to lovingly refer to as the placemat. But you can see we have over 2,000 miles of roads that we have to maintain. So if laid end to end, you could drive from, you know, here to Los Angeles. You know, we have enough landmass equivalent to the state of Rhode Island, a little over 2,000 square miles. We have enough buildings under roof, 36 million square feet under roof to represent about 6 Pentagons worth. And so it's a large and vast enterprise, but as the pie charts show there, and it may be a little bit hard to read in the back of the room, as the pie charts show, and I'll get into it a little bit more, is it's also have a number of challenges, especially in age, the number of excess facilities, and the condition of these facilities. And those are the issues that we're working to address right now. So I mentioned, and I took great pride, as you know, I repeated it over and over again in the Manhattan Project, and we are still living in many of those same facilities. Many of the major nuclear material activities are still being done in facilities that were built in the 1940s or early 50s. On this chart, this happens to be the Y-12 facility down in Tennessee, so this is one of our 8 major facilities. And you can see the buildings in red are the ones that are 60 years old or older. So anything built before 1956, 55 is in the red, and those are some of your, what I would call premier uranium handling facilities in not only in the country but in the world. And so this obviously provides some very serious challenges. And a couple of the notes there at the bottom of the slide, as John was mentioning, we are currently responsible for over 6,000 facilities and assets throughout the enterprise, spread throughout 7 states. So it makes, historically, one of the important points of the Manhattan Project is part of the security makeup of the Manhattan Project was secrecy. Many of the sites didn't even know the other sites existed. And so we have this 70-year legacy of security and isolation built into our genes. And so now we're coming in and say, hey, we don't want to handle infrastructure on a site-by-site level. We don't even want to, we want to handle these decisions at an enterprise level. We want to put in enterprise management systems. We want to make enterprise-level decisions, and it's really not in our DNA to be able to do those types of activities. So that provides some of the challenges that we're dealing with. So as we said, we are tasked with, in my office, with safely operating and modernizing this very vast nuclear security enterprise that has over $50 billion worth of real property assets. So if that wasn't enough, a few other challenges. I highlighted many of the ones at the top here, the challenges that deal with the physical infrastructure and the makeup of the facilities from age and condition. We have a number of things. When I talk about age and failures, I'm talking about things like safety system failures, fire suppression failures, HVAC system failures. Usually you look at HVAC and say, okay, well, you have to live. It might be a little hot or a little cold. These HVAC systems provide the pressure, the ventilation, air pressure to prevent radioactive particles from escaping these facilities and the containment of these buildings. So when an air conditioner or HVAC goes down, depending on what building it is, depending if it's on the cafeteria or it's a major plutonium facility, that ventilation going down can be very, very dramatic effect. And I kid you not, that picture at the lower right is a fire suppression lead-in line corrosion to a facility where nuclear warheads are assembled and disassembled. And so traditionally right now, we're finding out about those types of failures when they happen. Okay, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing to try and overcome some of these activities. The other thing that I really want to point out on this slide is the bottom, and that is the outdated tools and processes. So this may not resonate with a lot of you in the room, but some of you may have seen Brad Pitt in Moneyball and the types of things that the baseball industry and the leading edge that his character did to look at really, truly the analytics and really understand what is driving the results you want to get. So in baseball, you want to win games, and for 100 years, people were focused on batting average or earned value. And I think through one small person, one very dedicated small group of people, they reanalyzed and relooked at the analytics and the metrics and discovered that baseball was completely disproportionately valuing what information was really driving results. And that's kind of where we are, maybe not just at the Department of Energy, but more broadly. We have focused on things like, in our vernacular, deferred maintenance, which deferred maintenance is a nice rough metric to tell you you've got a problem. But you cannot use deferred maintenance at all to make investment decisions. And so one of the big things that I'm going to talk about in this discussion is how are we re-looking at analytics and how are we trying to fix analytics. So this is how we're trying to tackle the problems, and this revolutionizing infrastructure logo that you see up here, revolutionizing infrastructure was something that a staff member mentioned. We need to revolutionize infrastructure. That led to, why don't we have a logo for revolutionizing infrastructure? Because what happens is people get excited about that. People get motivated about that. I mean, we truly feel like we're on the cutting edge and we're pushing ourselves to do more, not just on the cutting edge of what NNSA has been doing, but on the cutting edge of government, the cutting edge of industry, and trying to really think outside the box. And as I mentioned to you before, I don't have any background in infrastructure whatsoever. I'm learning it day by day as I go. Don't have any background in program project management. But a couple key things are, sometimes when you're willing to look at things in a different way and really ask, why have we been doing it this way? And you're willing to surround yourself with people who are not afraid to tell you you're wrong, and you will listen to smart people when they tell you you're wrong, you can really start to not only empower a small group of people, but that starts to rub off on a broader subset of folks. And I feel very empowered by the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, and they make me want to work harder because they're doing amazing things, and I feel like, I got to keep pushing myself harder not to let them down. But I think this whole idea of putting a face, putting a name, getting people excited about doing something is really important. And so that's what we've done on the back of all of our badges, or most of us have on the back of our badges this logo, and we carry it around, and we take it very seriously. And if people inside the department challenge us, say, you're not really revolutionizing stuff, you're fixing stuff, you're making it better, but you're really not revolutionizing it, we really kind of push back on that because we challenge ourselves every day to kind of be on the leading edge. So in addition to that, what this slide is really saying, or what I would really want to convey on this slide, is the fact that we are really focused on these analytic tools. We're really challenging ourselves first and foremost that if we plug the wrong data into the wrong tool and use that to make our investment decisions, then we really don't have a snowball's chance in hell of getting the desired outcome. And we actually have the slogan from, I showed Einstein earlier on the picture. We really have the slogan for Einstein hanging up in the walls at the Forrestal building that says, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is truly the definition of insanity. And I think that plays heavily into agile project management, agile techniques. And what I really want to talk about is how we're using agile beyond just IT development. How have we applied those agile techniques to project management, program management, portfolio management, and enterprise-wide management? And there's a few folks in the audience that are going to ask me questions if I don't hit the points that I know I want to hit on that subject. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But one of the things that we want to do to utilize those agile techniques is an enterprise approach. We have traditionally in NNSA sub-optimized our investment decisions by looking at a site approach, and in many cases, we're stuck in a facility-by-facility approach. So whether you're with the government, whether you're with industry, or whether you're with a university, you will all mark yourselves as, I'm with the University of Maryland. But you know that you have various individual units within your university or within your company or within the government where you work. And so typically, if a roof fails, there isn't even a facility-wide approach. Some facility manager, maybe responsible for 2 or 3 facilities, goes out and puts a procurement out on the street to buy that, to repair that roof. And typically when you do a roof repair, you're only repairing it once you already know it leaks and fails. So you know it's leaking and failing because there's a big storm that just came through, which means all of your neighbors' roofs are leaking and failing too. So you're out negotiating in very much a seller's market. So one, you sub-optimize because you're buying things one-off. Two, you're buying things at the worst price point for you to buy it. And so a lot of things that we're doing, we have a roof asset management program, or RAMP, where we now have collected the buying power. We have in the order of 30 million square feet of roofs. So we are throughout the enterprise. So if we bundle those together, negotiate a price in the off season, the downtime, to put people on retainer, then we can get a lot more roofs fixed than we can if we wait in a reactive mode. And so it's things like that. And when I say these things, I think part of Agile really is it's empowering the collective wisdom of everybody you're working with. I think a lot of times traditional project and program management is a hierarchical flow down type approach, whereas Agile is much more of a spoken wheel type approach, where anybody in the management chain, anybody in the supply chain has ideas that can quickly flow to enterprise-wide decision points. And I think that's one of the strategic advantages, that almost anybody in the organization can have an enterprise solution identified, quantified, and implemented in rather quick turnaround. And finally, what we're trying to do is start looking at longer range planning. Again, the example I gave on the roofs is, NNSA, DOE, like many organizations, is really good at, once you're driving down the road and the car runs over something, we're really good at stopping the car, getting out, and looking to see what we just ran over, okay? We might right now be in the case where we're seeing it as it flies up on the windshield, and where we want to get is, again, in the NNSA, when you're thinking about things like the life cycle of a nuclear warhead, things are not changing every 5 seconds. Believe me, folks, things do not change in those weapons, in real time. It is a very, predicted longer range, and we should and can be able to do more longer range planning. And so one of the things that we've done, both at the micro level, at the project level, as well as at the enterprise and strategic level, is start to push ourselves to more longer range planning. And I'm going to come back and talk about and touch on each one of these points here later in the briefing. And then finally, as I've professed to you, my passion is that Agile techniques are really effective in operating in this type of manner. So the main elements of Agile that we're using is we had a conversation a little bit earlier, some of us, about risk management. And we really want to have, at the end of the day, just like Moneyball, we want to have a data-driven. We don't want to make decisions based on, I heard somebody say this, or maybe this will happen. We want to make decisions on data. We want them risk-informed, okay? We're not going to try and fix everything. We don't want to fix everything. We want to fix the things in a prioritized order that are impacting the most risk. And that's how we want to drive our investments. We want to drive our investments based on that. The other thing that we want to do, and I know this may sound strange when you talk about Agile, because most people, when they think about Agile, think about ever evolving, ever forming. And it is true that there is ever evolving and ever reforming, but you need to focus in on standardizing so that you have a standardized, predictable, repeatable, and transparent process. So I think of that a little bit like, rolling a snowball. Even though that snowball, as you roll it, is getting bigger and changing, the fundamental core piece of the snowball, you didn't just start over again. And so Agile doesn't mean random. It doesn't mean changing, from one direction to another direction and back and forth. It means, continually evolving and maturing, the direction that you're trying to head and where you're going. And so you can work standard, predictable, repeatable, and transparent procedures and processes into your Agile activity. The other thing that we did when we kicked this off is, I'd like to say we gave people Agile training, but I would say we probably gave them Agile awareness. because many people, as I explained earlier, had a certain mindset. And Agile can look random. It can frustrate and confuse people if you don't explain to them up front that you're going to take an Agile approach and what does that mean and how you're going to deploy it. So we did spend some time when we kicked this initiative off, and this initiative that I'm going to talk about here, I came over to this job not quite 3 years ago. So everything that I'm talking about here has occurred in the last 3 years. But when we first came over, we kicked it off, had a couple WebExes, VTCs, and town hall meetings, and just gave people an awareness about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what it's going to look like, and there is a method behind the madness. And I think the other thing that's very important about Agile is, and the value of it is that unlike most activities, we would have spent probably, the better part of 3 years just getting our strategy together, and then we wouldn't have started implementing our strategy over the next 5 years. And so until our employees would have seen the first benefit from the traditional way of doing things, wouldn't have been until 4 or 5 years into the process. Our employees here were seeing value and benefit every about 2 months. And I have a very brief slide on our IT portion of this, but our IT solution, what we call G2, delivers new enhancements every 8 weeks. So every 8 weeks, just from our IT tool, our employees are seeing improvements into the system. So with that, just conceptualize. I saw some Agile graphics, and I thought they really looked cool, so I took some of those and reoriented it for what we're doing in NNSA. So this, in a nutshell, is our infrastructure management process, our Agile process. And at the very top level there in the center with the little bullseye, those are all your external activities. So external to us, we have the Department of Energy Strategic Plan, and we have the NNSA Enterprise Strategic Vision, and all those things that provide us with our activities. As an infrastructure organization, we service customers. We don't exist for ourselves. We exist to service customers both within NNSA and DOE and outside of NNSA and DOE. And we always keep that in mind, that we are making decisions based on what is in the best interest of the customer. And of course, our ultimate customer is the American taxpayer, and that is the way we're driving our thought process. So I'll talk about everything on this chart a little bit, but if you look at the fact that you can break this down any way you want, but for the purpose of this exercise, I kind of broke down the hierarchy as there's the office level, there's the broad-based level, perhaps at my level, the office and where the strategic vision comes in place. Then we break that down into individual programs. So in an infrastructure area, a program would be operations of facilities as a program. Maintaining and maintenance of facilities is a separate program. The recapitalization of facilities is a third program. The disposition of the facilities. So you might think of those as similar work units. We generally refer to them as programs. And the things that we do in DOE headquarters is we don't do project management. If I slip into the terms project or project management, I'll try and catch myself. But we really do more program, portfolio, enterprise, type of management. And then at the site level, those 7 sites that we talked about, that's really where the project management occurs. And so what you see in, I don't know if I can press this, but this document here is our program management plan. I'll talk to you about a little bit about that in more detail. That sets all the basis for what we do. This provides all the procedures and structure for our program management philosophy. Then this is what we call the Master Asset Plan, or MAP. That's what is actually our implementation of our infrastructure strategy that deploys the program management philosophies. We have an enterprise-wide, or we're working on an enterprise-wide now infrastructure map, and that both drives and is informed by site-level planning. So site-level planning is at a much more detailed level than enterprise planning, but we need to set the vision up here and drive it down to them. They need to set the reality and the ground truth here and drive that back into the planning, and it's a circular-type planning activity. And then from that plan actually drives budget guidance. So it's from this plan. I know this is a strange concept, but until recently, we did planning and we did budgeting, and there was no connection between the plan and the budget. I know that sounds crazy, but we had plans that we did put on shelves, nobody but the person that wrote them read, and then we did budgeting in a vacuum. So now we've started to put in the line that connects those. And again, the budget guidance flows down. What are our strategic budget guidance at the office level? How does that fall down to the program and provide additional detail? How does the sites interpret that information? I think the real heart of this chart in Agile is actually the next column. You see IPL or Integrated Priority List. I think Agile may call it a backlog. There's different words, but this is what I'm talking about. We want to be able to use data-driven, risk-informed information to create a one-to-end list of all the things that we need. So I need to fix the roof on this building first. I need to fix the HVAC on that building second. It is a one-to-end prioritized list for every single project we're going to execute. And that is the Agile philosophy, that if I can create a prioritized list, I can start then turning the envelope. The envelope in traditional planning is what is my scope, and therefore it defines my resources and schedule. That is particularly dangerous in the current government setting, because with continuing resolutions and other activities, the government is driving inefficiency into our site management. Oops, sorry, I had too many here. We are driving inefficiency into our site's execution of projects because the money never arrives on time. It's never what we thought it was going to be. It's always incrementally delivered. So we are actually creating strategies in our program management plan that actually say that is the norm now. We need to accept the way the government provides money is the norm, and we need to develop project management strategies that take that into effect so that we can downstream drive the efficiencies into the process. And so once we make the selection, so again, in the old-fashioned way, scope drives money and schedule. Now what we're saying is we have all of our scope rank ordered. Now money and schedule drive what scope gets done, and we can do that scope in a prioritized order. We don't need to think about it. This has, and I wish I would have put this in the slides, this has really paid dividends with the Congress in what is almost historical speed. 3 years ago when I came to the program, Congress said, you guys are so bad at implementing your recapitalization projects, we are going to dictate in legislation exactly every recapitalization project you do. So they put in legislation controls at the $1 million level. I mean, that is somewhat unheard of micro level management. 3 years later, without us even asking, last year we asked for them to remove the recapitalization controls, and they put in their legislation based on the transparency and confidence that this provided. They removed those controls. This year in the 17 budget, without asking, they said that they would take all of our operations of facilities, which is currently split into 8 different control elements, and they would group it together in one control point. That one control point is now $1 billion control point. So we went from them managing us at the $1 million level to them giving us control that we didn't even ask for at the $1 billion level. And it makes us more efficient if we can more quickly move money around to address wherever. Again, we can't always predict where the highest risks are going to be. Sometimes with facilities that date back to the 40s, they jump up on us whether we like it or not, whether we're good planners or not. So having that flexibility is critical. And then finally, we have our G2 system. You may not be able to see it in there, but we have our information, our Program Management Information System Generation 2, which we lovingly call G2, which helps us integrate all this information. And as I mentioned earlier, the development of that system is also under Agile controls. So I've highlighted a few of these things, and so therefore the second half of this presentation can go much quicker. But I mentioned on that last slide, the fundamental cornerstone and foundation of what we do is our program management plan. And this is new. The first one was published in September 2014. didn't exist in infrastructure before then. This plan is also under agile controls, the first plan. The date was fixed. This plan was going to be issued September 2014. Whatever we could get into it, we got into it, and whatever we didn't was for the next iteration. We did not hold this plan up for scope that couldn't get in it. And it was really a cooperative dialogue between all the folks at headquarters and the field offices. Yes, I would say that I was driving the direction it wanted to go, but I would try and push people out of their comfort zone, like kind of catching a fish. You reel the fish in really tight, and then you give the fish some slack. You reel it in really tight, you give it some slack, because of the 70 years of stovepipes, nobody wanted to change what they were doing. So I had to force them to change. But I wasn't smart enough to know what the change should be, so I had to give them the room and the breathing room to tell me if once they came to the realization that we were going to make change and I was going to make the decision unless they informed that decision, then we were able to do that. The first version of this document was about 50 pages. It laid out some basic concepts. It provided the first level of a work breakdown structure, the first level of process flows, and the things that you would normally think about in a program plan. Then the day it was issued, we started on the next year's version, and we said, okay, now you guys know where we're headed. The second version came out. It's probably twice as long. It's twice as long because we were now able to really get people wrapped around what we were trying to achieve. They knew it wasn't going to go away, and they really became more involved and interactive in providing those comments. So we've established the elements of cost, the work breakdown structure, the programming and budgeting philosophy, and again, standardizing everything. My commitment to them was, once we figure out how to do this, we will add to it, but we're not going to fundamentally change it and redo it. We have just now kicked off the third iteration, which will be issued in September of 16. And my feeling is that probably the document will not grow above what it is right now. We're probably in maintenance mode right now. It'll probably always be about a 100-page document. Now we're going to be making the tweaks. Now we're, so the first document is what do I need to learn for elementary school? The second document was, what is the math material I get in high school, and now we're in kind of college, and we're, it's not that we're not going to keep evolving, but I don't think that the document needs to fundamentally always, change. The second element, and you'll see that it looks very similar, and if you don't look at the words on these documents, you don't know what you're looking at, because we also have gone to a branding theme to try and, again, get people to rally around an enterprise approach. It's an enterprise solution. It's an NNSA solution. It's no longer a Y-12 solution or a Livermore solution or a Los Alamos solution, and so that's what we're trying to go to. Whereas the program management plan on the last side was new because that was only 2 years old, this is really new. We haven't even issued a master asset plan yet. We worked the latter part of last year with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory to start developing the concepts for this. We've completed, so what the master asset plan is going to be is it's going to be that integrated long-term infrastructure strategic plan that is driven by, I say programmatic requirements. What I really need, that's our vernacular for customer requirements. Okay, so where I say programmatic there, you can say customer. So it's an integrated long-term infrastructure strategic plan driven by our customers' requirements. So we not only need to know what widgets, the weapons program needs to send through these facilities today, we need to know what the weapons program is thinking about sending through these facilities 5 years, 10 years, 15, 25 years from now, because changing an infrastructure this large, we got to get started today if I'm going to change something that they need 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So again, this is the concept of trying to take DOE, the Department of Energy, from stopping their car and looking at what they just ran over to being able to see something coming your way down the street and take evasive actions to avoid that. It is a 25-year beyond vision. That's where we're headed. We do this through 2 to 3 day deep dives at each site. So we've had a deep dive at Livermore, we've had a deep dive at Kansas City, and we have a deep dive at at Y-12 coming up. But we will do a deep dive at all 8 sites this year. It's a pretty aggressive schedule to pull a lot of people together to go through this. And so again, we are evolving. If you ask me right now, show me what a master asset plan is going to look like, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. Because it's going to evolve. It's going to use the same agile techniques. I can tell you what we talked about is what are the 3 or 4 most important things that we need in a master asset plan? All right, we put them in there. Now we use that master asset plan to educate other people. This is what we're thinking. Well, they have other ideas, so we put 3 or 4 more things in a master asset plan. Eventually, we'll be stabilizing on how many ideas. So because the master asset plan is an annual cycle, I usually like to tell people it takes you about 3 or 4 iterations until you stabilize through the agile approach. So for this, it's going to take us 3 or 4 years because the cycle is 1 year. Things that are monthly or happen more frequently, you're not going to have to wait as long. But we will issue a master asset plan December of this year because, again, like I said, schedule is fixed. What that looks like by the end of the year, it will have some things that we know in it. We've challenged people to get other stuff in there. So as I mentioned earlier, this will definitely roll into programming and budgeting. I won't spend too much time on this just because I'm kind of running short on time and I want to make sure there's time for some questions. But the idea is twofold. First of all, everything that I just talked to you about in planning will roll into budgeting and programming. And what you kind of see here is this is not made up data. This is our IPL. This is the enterprise-wide integrated IPL of projects that we need to fund. So we know what the project is. We know what the earliest start date is. We know what the earliest completion date is. We know how much it's going to cost. So we know all that stuff, and we know it racked top to bottom. Unfortunately, most of our stuff needed to be done years ago, so we got a very unlimited list right now. But what this is right here is, you give me the budgeting scenarios. Do you want to give me $100 million a year for recapitalization? Do you want to give me $50 million a year? Do you want to give me 50 going up to 100, coming down to 50? So you see these funding profiles are different budgeting scenarios. So now I can link my IPL with any one and all these scenarios, and the G2 system will create your traditional Gantt chart. It will optimize based on buying down your highest risk, and it will present to us what is your best investment portfolio. So as many different scenarios as you think up, I can easily and quickly articulate to you what gets done in 15, what gets done in 16, what gets done in 19, what gets done in 22. So right now, because we're still only at the level where we can see stuff right before it hits our windshield, and the fact that we've got such a backlog, I probably only can look maybe 5 years out into the future. But as we get better at doing long-term planning, we'll be able to look 25 years out in the future. And when we look 25 years out in the future, all the earliest start dates won't be 2015 or 2017. The earliest start date will be 2029 or 2041 because we just put in an HVAC system. We know it has a 25-year life, and so we don't need to replace it for 25 years. But what we want to focus on is maintaining that system and getting the full life out of it because it's a lot cheaper to do that than run stuff to failure and replace it. So that's kind of what this slide is really showing you, how that lays in and how truly agile this is, where it's actually budget that is the variable and it's scope and schedule that are what's kind of more fixed. I'll touch on this conceptually. The infrastructure tools that we're working on are very much based in an enterprise risk management way. And there's a couple tools here, unfortunately. I won't be able to get into a lot of detail. But we have a mission dependency risk that tells us how important that facility is to the mission. And we're using this Corps of Engineer tool called Builder that measures condition, that tells us the condition of the facility tells us how close it is to failure. And by plotting that enterprise risk, it tells you whether you want to actively reduce risk for recapitalization, whether you want to maintain a good facility that's important to you in operating condition, whether you want to transform a good facility that's underutilized to something more important, or whether you want to get rid of it. For the sake of timing, this is what it looks like when you start plotting that previous conceptual chart into real data. And as I would say, we just have been getting to finalize some of this stuff earlier this year. So we're still exploring the agile practices of that. But this is the broader enterprise risk management. The subset of that is, this is the MDI. Remember, I said MDI, or Mission Dependency Index, the importance of the facility to the mission, is just but one aspect of that. And MDI in its own right is a risk register with two axes also complicated equation, which I cannot explain even if I wanted to. But one of the key points here is we ask ourselves, what is the fewest number of questions that we can get? What is the fewest amount of data that we can collect that has the highest correlation to the information that we want, the results that we want? Because we don't want to spend a lot of time and money collecting information that doesn't have a high degree of correlation. We ask basically 4 questions to create MDI. We ask 4 questions per building to create MDI, and we plug it into a formula that shows how we value the weights of those questions. And then the other thing it does is, because the other thing that we've never been able to see before in NNSA is, how does one facility rely on another facility? So we may have a plutonium facility over here that people always thought was important. This is under Moneyball. This is your batting average. You know, everybody thinks, you know, batting average is important or whatever. This is your baseball bat. And everybody forgets that if they don't have the baseball bat, they can't hit the ball. And so what this does is, this is your utilities. This is your electrical distribution. And it allows us in a visual way. These questions allow us to get to the interconnectivity of the facilities. Now we can look at process flow and flow management. Oops. For the sake of time, the second area looking at condition is using Builder. I mentioned it was a Corps of Engineer product. Basically what it does right here, again, it's always easier to fix something before it breaks. It's always easier and cheaper to fix it before it breaks than after it breaks. Just like your car or anything else, the manufacturer knows that you should expect to get so much use out of your spark plug, so much use out of your tires. So what we're doing is we're basically creating SimCity for the NNSA complex. We are taking the entire 6,000 facilities. We are putting into a database every single subcomponent, every HVAC in every facility, every fire suppression. And we know now, once we do that, we know what the expected life is for that. So we have an expected life curve that we do physical inspection against. So now we'll know is that because that car is sitting at the beach, you know, it's rusting faster than the car sitting someplace else. So now we know that we can rely on both predicted data as well as measured data to determine when the right opportunity is to invest. This here is we are 1 year into a 3-year effort. As I said, you can imagine trying to model every single building system at 6,000 buildings throughout an enterprise that has classified materials. 3 years is a very aggressive schedule, and we are 1 year into a 3-year schedule on that. This just visualizes, again, how you can start bringing a lot of information together in a very graphic way. I was mentioning earlier, we all buy iPhones, we all buy computer games and other things, and the first thing we do is open up the instruction manual and we read how you operate the iPhone and how you play the computer game. Obviously, nobody does that. They don't even come with instruction manuals anymore. Part of our IT development strategy is we want to deploy IT systems to manage this that are inherent, that when the users get them in the hands, it's inherent what they're looking at and how easy it is, and mimicking everything that you would mimic on an iPhone. And I could pull out my iPhone, but we do have a G2 app, and I approve all. This is about a $1.5 billion a year organization. I approve all financial changes on my phone, basically through the G2 app. That all change control flows through the change control process. I'm hoping to prove baseline change controls more than just financial changes. I'm hoping to prove schedule changes soon when that functionality gets deployed. I promise I'm coming down the end of my briefing. This is, again, just wrapping everything up that I talked about. If you remember that chart that I talked about before, I said, hey, this was ranked order by the IPL of projects we want to do. Well, that ranked order was based on how important was the facility that work was being done at. So the MDI, the enterprise risk management, and the builder condition assessment. But there's other factors in our recapitalization strategy. We really look at 3 key factors: the productivity to the program, the safety risk, and the return on investment. And this gives you a little case. This is the totality of the program risk equation. We asked 6 questions to drive program risk. the before and after state, very unlikely to very likely, and again, plug it into a calculation that, again, from a program standpoint, I've included MDI because from a program buyback, the value of the building that I'm doing that in is important. From a safety standpoint, MDI is not included. It doesn't matter if the person gets injured in the cafeteria or in a production plant, but we factor those things in, and that's what's driving the risk-based analysis here. I won't go through this at all. These are just give you some highlights of various reporting that we're able to get out of our systems now. I did talk about, again, as you can see from my presentation, I could talk about 2 hours on each slide of the zones. This is the only thing that I say about G2, and it is a significant, powerful system. It manages over $2 billion annually, has over 900 users, does 19,000 transactions per month. It's all electronically tracked. We have audit trails out the wazoo. When GAO comes in, we basically give them a token and say, knock yourselves out. And this is the kind of credibility that we've been able to get Congress to rethink about how, how we are managing the programs. A number of other things there that you guys can get copies of the slides. The last 2 slides I wanted to get, that I just wanted to talk on briefly, is I mentioned to you earlier, not only myself, but a lot of people on my staff and throughout the enterprise do not have traditional program or project management training or education. What was really important for us to do was set up an independent group, what we call the Program Management Improvement Team. We have a group of 4 or 5 outside experts in industry, in academia, that have, some of them have experience internationally, some of them have experience at DOE sites, and they come in and tell us, and the best thing that they do oftentimes is pat us on the back and say, your instincts are correct and keep running. If you were planning on slowing up because you didn't think this meshed with project or program management philosophies, keep going because it does. They can also point out where one of our sites has a best practice that the other sites should be aware of. Like supply chain management, these guys are doing it so superbly, you probably want to let other sites know, don't reinvent the wheel, just talk to these guys. And finally, they can provide us that critique, that very hard critique. Hey, you're headed down an area where others have failed. We're not saying don't do it, but you might want to talk to these folks who have tried that before and at least gain lessons from them. So I would say an external group like that, again, 4 people, we meet quarterly for 2 or 3 days. It's been very, very invaluable. And finally, these are just my final thoughts, and again, I apologize for kind of taking too long here. But, don't be afraid to be revolutionary. Don't be afraid to push the envelope and be cutting edge. There's a lot of excitement and exciting things that you can do. Agile can definitely be used for more than just IT development. And I would say, if anything, we're using IT development to influence our program management philosophies versus the other way around, defining our program management philosophies to drive our IT solution. Again, that is not unlike what you see going on in social media, where it's the technology driving the behaviors and the processes and procedures and not the other way around. Failure is always a possibility. You have to have some thick skin. You have to realize that part of living on the cutting edge, part of being agile, is not every decision you're going to make is correct. The biggest thing to do is admit when you've taken a wrong turn as quickly as possible, because it's much easier to fix and change your direction. You're very nimble at that point, and you can course correct easily. You saw the deer, you turned to right, but the deer was running from left to right, so you turn left, you have plenty of time to miss them. If the deer jumps out in front of your car and you try to do that, you don't really have any time to react, or if you wait until you're right up on the deer, then you don't have time to react properly. So you gotta take risks, you gotta walk the walk. You can't, as a leader, as a manager, it's going to drive you harder than it's going to drive your staff. So you gotta be leading in the agile process. As you can see, passion. I mean, you gotta like what you're doing. You gotta really love it. I tell my kids and I tell others, the best job advice, the best career advice has been always the jobs that I turned down, because I just couldn't see myself doing it. I just couldn't see myself being passionate about doing it. And I actually told one of the people one day when they were offering me a job, I said, you want the passionate me. You don't want the me that would be doing the job that, if I hated it. So, again, you want to do something that you really feel passionate about. And then, again, I think, probably the heart of Agile philosophy is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You can make a lot of forward progress, and what can happen is that snowball effect. Once people can, if you were describing a snowball and nobody ever saw a snowball before, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. The world was flat. We're going to fall off the edge if we do something. You got to try and take a risk. You got to try and shape that small snowball, and then people will start getting behind you and help pushing it and making it bigger and making it something more than you could have even envisioned yourself. So with that, I will end. I'm getting the 0 sign, thumbs down. But anyways, thank you so much for putting up with me for the last hour. So. Do we have time for questions or no? Okay, good. All right. Any questions? Yes. So, that's a great question about have we looked on a broader sense about how this models out and an accident or something might impact the populated areas around these facilities. I would say we have not yet done that in the infrastructure management activities. We have a sister organization to us that is responsible for the safety analysis and the safety activities and all the modeling that they do. And fortunately, that sister organization, my boss, my immediate supervisor, has safety and infrastructure in his organization. And he is actually using the things that we're doing on the infrastructure side to drive project management, cultural changes into the safety side. That is really an industry that is slow to change. Because of the analytical analysis and truly the impacts if they make a small mistake. They don't quite have the margin of trial and error that I mentioned before, but he is driving them towards that direction. So we haven't done the modeling within this system as much as you pointed out. That modeling does exist on a one-off basis, not an enterprise basis, but my manager is heading in that direction. But you do raise a good point. Part of the reason we did this placemat was both as a internal, rallying point, but also to get people to realize how bad the infrastructure really is, because its voice has not been out there, to understand that these are sitting in some very populated areas. So. Right. Right. So we're making those connections. We don't go quite that far, but as you see, I lead them right up to the edge. My bosses won't let me go quite that far, but we lead them up to the edge. We are saying that we can't. This is not going to be a one-year fix. It took us 20 or 30 plus years to get into the situation we are. These facilities should have been changed out in the 90s, but they weren't, and it's going to be a challenging. And I want to reassure people that we're not just trying to rebuild on the footprint that we have. We need to get smaller. We don't need all this stuff, and we don't need this footprint that we had during the Cold War. We need to be smaller, leaner, and take advantage of the current infrastructure technologies. Other questions, comments?
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You said there were 4 questions that you asked to calculate the mission dependency index. Do you know what one of those 4 questions were?
Yeah, we can get you the exact 4 questions, because I'm gonna destroy it. But the questions really go, first of all, we look at the facility because it is an enterprise risk management matrix on its own. We look at the facility, and the first question that we ask is, how important is this facility to the mission? If we lost this facility, what kind of impact would it be to the mission, okay? But we also asked the question, if we lost that facility, how hard would it be to replace? Because if it's critical to the mission, but I can walk out and replace it for $5 tomorrow, then I don't need to worry about it in the same way as if it's as critical to the mission and it would take, $10 billion and 15 years to replace the capability. So we asked that question about the facility itself. Then the other two questions asked how many facilities rely on that facility, kind of that connectivity stream. So if I say, hey, I don't want to lose this plutonium production facility, but if I lose electricity, I lose it. If I lose waste handling, I lose it. So I need to understand the interconnectivity. So the 4 questions are related around those fundamental principles.
Okay, I think, so that was very helpful, and I think one of the things I wonder is who really is best at defining mission critical? So I understand your question, which is how critical is it to the mission? Is that one person? Is that a group? Is it a governance board? Is it?
So what we've done, because we went from 0 to 60, we went from 0 to implementation in like 6 months. So this is actually concept is taken from others who are using it. I think NASA and some others are using it. And what we did is we first and foremost asked the subject matter experts in the field to take the first cut at defining those, and then we shared it with the programs, the customers. We said, okay, the subject matter experts that you pay to get the work done, rank them like this, and we basically have them perform kind of a fatal flaw, do you agree, type activity. They're just agreeing to the answers to those questions. They don't, the formula is ours, and we balance the formula, but they verify that the answers to those 4 questions they agree with, so. And typically what happens is these utilities are supporting multiple facilities. So when you look at how did we rank these facilities before we had MDI and how did we rank them after, the big facilities that everybody thought were important pretty much stayed important. All the facilities that were utilities started coming up on the list if they were supporting, sometimes they supported more than one of the traditionally thought to be critical facilities. So it's not like we've thrown batting average completely out, but on-base percentage, walks have become a lot more important. It's not like hits or home runs have become less important, but walks and things like that are more important than we thought they were. So, yes, there's a question over here. Mm-hmm. So as far as agile awareness, I just kind of, myself and our IT person who came with me to the program, we just pulled together, 5 or 6 or 7 slides and kind of just conceptualized, at a very, very macro level, some of the differences between the traditional, waterfall type, activities and how we were going to operate in an agile way. And again, talking a little bit about some of these rapid prototyping or however you want to try and just, try to play to the audience and things that they might recognize as, what do you mean by agile? Some people think spiral development and other type of activities. So. But it wasn't a formalized education program. That's what I said. It was more of just awareness. And sometimes it was repetitive, hey, this is what we're going to do. We'll do it for a couple months. Then we had another one. Remember, what we just did in the PMP looked a lot like what we said we were going to do and how we're going to run through it. Any last questions before I get pulled off the stage? Yes. That's a good question. Right now, we have it all. Right now, what we're using is we have a lot of it integrated into our G2 system because we have all of the answers to all the questions to the ranking factors, how important is my facility, are in G2. Every time someone submits a project, now they're going to say, I'm going to replace this ventilation system. There's those series of questions about that project. How much is that going to improve productivity to the customer? How much is it going to fix safety? If it's the air conditioning for a cafeteria, it's not going to fix safety that much. If it's a ventilation for another facility. So that all gets captured in the planning phases in G2. Then we have, not to the degree I would like it yet, but then we have some subject matter expert review. Are they trying to game the system? If someone's off, since the categories are very high, very low, we're just worried, are they off by more than one category? If we would have ranked it high and they gave it very high, I'm not so worried. But if we would have ranked it very low and they gave it very high, then we need a course correction. or fundamentally our philosophy doesn't come out. But we are literally performing triage at this point, and the difference between, say, the first 20 projects isn't that critical. But we do a sanity check that we are not a slave to the tool. And we have an annual meeting where we bring everybody from the field and the customers in, and we project that list on a screen, and we kind of take them in segments, kind of like an eye exam. Is there anything in group 1 that's, is there something in group 2 that's more important than group 1? And if we kind of say they're all important, but nothing's more important, then we kind of move on, and so we provide that quick sanity check to it. Right. Right. And we haven't fully deployed the Builder condition assessment. We're 1 year into 3 years. Builder has some of those predictive capabilities, Monte Carlo-based predictions that are then rebased when they do physical inspections. So if something's supposed to last 20 years, you know what the 20-year curve is. You do an inspection. Even the inspections are projected. So once I replace it, I'm not going to do an inspection every year early on. I'll wait 3 years and then do inspection every 2 years. And then if the condition gets worse, I'll do inspection frequently more often so that I can better pinpoint the replacement. But we're probably another 2 years away from being able to say how effective that's going to be for us to use. But that's kind of where we're headed. And one of my employees has a proposal for what he calls the Athena project, which is to use cognitive computer learning to start helping us better analyze this series of data. And we also want to look into some of the building information modeling to see, again, most of our buildings are old, but as we start building new buildings, maybe we can factor in the value of all the CAD drawings and other pieces into how we look at this. So I thank you again. I'll be around for a little bit if people want to come up for a few questions, but unfortunately I have to get back to the office pretty soon. So thank you, everyone.